Welcome to the Analyst. Today we'll be taking up 9 newspaper articles from the Hindu and the Indian Express and discussing them. The handout for the same will be available in the description of this video for your kind perusal. Please have a look at that. The first article that we'll be taking up is related to the new criminal codes, Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita and Bharatiya Nagrik Suraksha Sanhita, as a petition was moved in the Supreme Court to stay the implementation of the new criminal codes which are scheduled to come into effect from July 1st. The second article is related to the fishing sector, as some Indian fishermen were arrested for illegally fishing in the Sri Lankan waters. The third article is related to the financial stability report, as the RBI released its biannual financial stability report. The fourth article is related to the SAARC currency swap, as RBI will put in place a new framework for the currency exchange agreements among the SAARC countries. The fifth article is related to the food buffer policy, as the open market sale of wheat and chana has helped in controlling the cereal and pulses inflation, so extending the buffer stocks to other staples makes sense. Additionally, we'll also be taking up 4 prelim snippets. Now, the first article is related to the new criminal codes, Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita and Bharatiya Nagrik Suraksha Sanhita. The context behind it is that a petition was moved in the Supreme Court seeking a stay on the implementation of the new criminal codes. These criminal codes are scheduled to come into effect from July 1st. So we will be discussing the two criminal codes, Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita and the Bharatiya Nagrik Suraksha Sanhita, and the changes that they intend to bring as compared to the erstwhile IPC and CRPC. This is important in GS2 in governance part. Now, starting with the Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita. Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita is the substantive law, that is, it prescribes punishments for the various offences. It is going to replace the outgoing IPC. Now, coming on to the provisions, when we compare the provisions related to sedition, in the erstwhile IPC, it was contained under section 124A. And sedition was defined and a punishment was prescribed under IPC under this section. Now, the new code does not contain sedition as an explicit offence, but it prescribes for various offences. The offences against the state, especially the offences which disrupt the public order, threaten the sovereignty, unity, integrity of India, or lead to various subversive activities. Now, the similar offences, they are having a rather wider definition. For example, under section 150, even providing for financial aid for such acts is also punishable for any acts which are going to lead to subversive activities or which are going to lead to separatist feelings or tendencies, etc. Even the punishment which is prescribed in the new code, it is more. For example, under the IPC, the sedition was punishable with 3 years of imprisonment. Now the offences against state, they are punishable with 7 years of imprisonment. When we talk about terrorism, terrorism was not defined or its punishment was not prescribed under the IPC. It was contained under the Special Act UAPA, Unlawful Activities Prevention Act. Now terrorism has been defined within the Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita. It says that any act which is done by any person which threatens the security of state or the sovereignty, unity and integrity of India, or it intimidates any general citizenry, or it disrupts any public order, then that act can be categorized as a terrorist act. Specifically, the new code prescribes that certain acts will be categorized as terrorist acts. For example, the acts which are contained under the second schedule of the UAPA, or any acts, for example, carrying firearms, bombs or explosive materials, etc., which can ultimately intimidate people or threaten citizens, they can be termed as terrorist acts. Likewise, the punishment has also been prescribed under the new code. It says that if any terrorist act leads to a death of a citizen or any person, then the punishment will be either death penalty or life imprisonment. Whereas for all other terrorist activities, the punishment will be from 5 years to life imprisonment. When we talk about organized crime, again this is also defined within the new code Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita. It defines any act which is a continuing unlawful activity. The key word is continuing unlawful activity which uses violence to intimidate people, to intimidate the victims and is used to gain material or financial benefit out of it, whereby the individuals are acting singly or jointly, then in such case all the members of such organized crime syndicate will be punishable. Now it also prescribes for punishment. If such organized crime leads to death of any person, then the punishment shall be either death penalty or life imprisonment, or for all other cases of organized crime the punishment shall be 5 years to life imprisonment. So the new code tries to give a comprehensive definition as well as punishment for the terrorist activities as well as organized crime. Now it also prescribes for petty organized crime as well. That is, the crimes like snatching, theft, etc. they are explicitly also punishable under the new code. It also provides for a separate punishment for the murder by a group of persons. That is, if 5 or more persons jointly murder any person on the grounds of caste, race, religion, sex, place of birth, the specified grounds, on these grounds if a murder is committed by 5 or more people, then it is separately punishable as well. It also provides for certain other provisions. For example, the erstwhile IPC provided that if a girl of less than 12 years of age is gang raped, then the penalty shall be death penalty. Now the new code provides that any minor girl, if she is gang raped, then the penalty which can be prescribed can be death penalty. Likewise, it prescribes for a new offense, that is, if there is a sexual intercourse which is done by deceitful means. For example, under the false pretext of marriage, then it shall also constitute an offense under the new criminal code Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita. It also extends the applicability of certain offenses to boys. It points towards the gender equality, the gender equal nature of the new code. It says that earlier the IPC prescribed a punishment for any person who was importing girls of less than 21 years for illicit intercourse. Now it prescribes punishment for the illicit importation of boys as well if the imported boys are less than 18 years of age. It provides for certain provisions, for example, community service. That is a good provision as it is borrowed from the advanced countries, the Western countries like US, whereby the minor transgressions can be penalized through community service, as is done in USA, for example, like the acts of vandalism, petty theft, drunk driving, etc. in USA are penalized through community service usually. The new code also provides for the offense of mob lynching. That is, if a group of 5 or more people acting in concert murder any person on the specified grounds like race, religion, caste, gender, sex, place of birth, etc., then each member who are acting in concert shall be punished. So it is similar to an offense of mob lynching. It omits the offense of adultery. The offense of adultery was contained in the erstwhile IPC and it was struck down by the Supreme Court in Joseph Shine versus Union of India. In line with that judgment, now the offense of adultery has been omitted from the new criminal code. It has also struck down the section 377. The Supreme Court in Navtej Singh Johar versus Union of India had provided for the decriminalization and the striking down of section 377, but it leads to an anomaly whereby if any crime is committed of unnatural sexual intercourse against a man, then it is not punishable under any explicit section under the new criminal code, as the section 377 of the erstwhile IPC has been omitted, but no relevant section which is similar in nature has been included in the new criminal code. The marital rape, which was supposed to be criminalized, there were debate regarding it, but it has not been criminalized under the new criminal code Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita. Now coming on to the other criminal code, Bharatiya Nagarik Suraksha Sanhita, which is going to replace the criminal procedure code, the CRPC. Here also certain changes have been made. For example, when it comes to the detention of under trials, the CRPC provided that the under trials who had already served half of the maximum punishment which could be imposed for the crime that they had committed, then they should be released, except if they had committed a crime which is punishable with death penalty. This was an exception. Now the new code adds certain more exceptions. It says that if any person has committed a crime which is punishable with a punishment of life imprisonment, then also he should not be released from jail on a personal bond after serving just half of the maximum sentence. Also, if the person has committed more than one offense, then also he should not be released from prison after releasing just half of the maximum sentence which can be imposed, provided he is under trial. It provides for one another provision. It says that if the person is a first time offender, then in that case he can be released on a personal bond from jail after serving just 1/3 of the maximum sentence that can be imposed, provided the trial is still ongoing. Now the new code provides for the electronic mode for the conducting of trial, inquiries, proceedings, and even production of devices, evidences, even electronic evidences also shall be admissible in court. It says that for the medical examination of accused, usually it is done by the registered medical practitioner. For this, earlier the provision was that any police officer of at least the rank of a sub-inspector has to request the registered medical practitioner for the conducting of medical examination of the accused. Now the new code says that any police officer, irrespective of his rank, can request the registered medical practitioner to conduct a medical examination of the accused. It provides for the provisions related to the forensic investigation. It says that forensic investigation shall be mandatory for all the offences which are punishable for more than 7 years of imprisonment. It is to make sure that there are no misinvestigations or malpractices in investigation, and the forensic investigation shall also be recorded through the digital devices like cameras and audio videographed. Earlier there was a provision that the district magistrate had the power to prohibit any person from carrying arms if it was, in the opinion of the district magistrate, harmful or threatening to the public order in that region. Now that power of the district magistrate has been taken away, this provision has been omitted. Now, there was a provision in the IPC that the metropolitan magistrate or a judicial magistrate can order any person who has been arrested during investigation to provide for his signature or fingerprint impressions. But now the new code says that not only any person who has been arrested during investigation, but any person can be ordered by the metropolitan magistrate or judicial magistrate to provide for signature, even finger impressions, etc. This is to ensure that the trial conducted is fair. The new code also provides for certain timelines for some procedures. You do not need to remember all of these timelines, but you can mention a few just to show the essence or the significance of the new code to ensure that the trial is expedited. For example, the RMP, the registered medical practitioner, has to examine the rape victims and provide the reports to the investigating officer. The report has to be provided to the investigating officer, who is a policeman, within 7 days by the RMP. The judgment has to be given by the court within 30 days after the completion of the arguments in the case by the trial court. It can be extended by another 30 days, that is maximum of 60 days. The victim also has to be informed about the progress of the investigation. It has to be done within 90 days by the investigating officer. The Sessions Court usually frames the charges. Now the framing of charges has to be done by the Sessions Court within 60 days from the first hearing. In case a mercy petition is filed by the accused, it can be filed within 30 days and an appeal can be filed within 60 days. In case the appeal is rejected by the president for the mercy petition, then no further appeal is allowed. In certain cases, there is a sanction required to prosecute the civil servants, to prosecute the government officials. Earlier, there was no such timeline. Now, a timeline has been included, that is, if a sanction is required to prosecute a government official in a case, then that sanction has to be given within 120 days, and no sanction shall be required if the crime committed is related to sexual offences or trafficking. The Act also provides that in case a proclaimed offender absconds, a proclaimed offender is a person who has committed a crime which is punishable by more than 10 years of imprisonment and he does not appear in the court when called upon to do so, then such person is called a proclaimed offender. The new code provides that if a proclaimed offender has absconded, then the trial can continue in absence of the offender. The new code also omits a provision whereby the metropolitan magistrates were to be notified by the state governments. Metropolitan magistrates were notified usually in the metropolitan areas where the population was more than 1 million. Now let's also talk about certain key provisions of the Bharatiya Nagarik Suraksha Sanhita. It says that a copy of FIR has to be provided. This copy has to be provided to both the victim and the accused mandatorily within 14 days of registration of FIR, and it shall be provided free of cost. A zero FIR can also be registered. Zero FIR is an FIR which is registered in a police station in whose domain the crime has not been committed. Then the police station where the zero FIR is registered forwards the complaint to the police station where in whose jurisdiction the crime has been committed. It also provides for summary trials. The summary trials have been made mandatory for petty offences to ensure expedited trials. It says that an EFIR can be registered, and in case an EFIR is registered, then there should be a designated police officer in the police station to inform the family of the arrested person. It also provides for the scenarios where the handcuffs can be used. For example, if a person is a habitual or repeat offender who has escaped from custody, then handcuffs can be used. If a person has engaged in organized crime, terrorist activities, drug trafficking, illegal possession of arms, then also handcuffs can be used. Or if the offense is of a serious nature, for example, murder, rape, acid attack, counterfeit currency, human trafficking, sexual offense against children, or offenses against the state. It also provides for certain safeguards against the arrests. That is, if a person has to be arrested for an offense whose maximum punishment is less than 3 years, then a police official of at least the rank of a DSP has to approve that arrest, else the person cannot be arrested since the crime is not a serious one. Or if the person who is to be arrested is more than 60 years of age, again the approval of the police officer of at least the rank of DSP is required for the arrest. It provides for the punishment in the case of cognizable cases, that is, there the punishment shall be from 3 to 7 years, and in such cases the police officer who is conducting the inquiry has to conduct a preliminary inquiry to determine whether a clear case actually exists in this matter, and it has to be done within 14 days. Regarding detention also, it provides that any person who resists arrest or refuses or ignores or disregards the directions given as part of the preventive action, then that person can be taken into custody. Now, the next article is related to the fishing sector. The context behind it is that Indian fishermen have been arrested for illegal fishing in Sri Lankan waters. So, we will be discussing the significance of the fishing sector, the challenges that it faces, as well as a few government schemes related to it. This is important in GS3 under agriculture and allied activities. Now, first let's discuss the significance of the fishing sector. When we look at the exports from the fishing sector, the maximum exports are coming from the export of shrimps. It also accounts for about 2.36 million hectares of ponds and tanks in India. Therefore, the fishing potential in India is huge. India has a huge coastline of 7,500 kilometers and 1.1 million hectares is composed of the brackish water. It provides for the livelihoods to 28 million people in India, and India is second globally in the aquaculture industry. So, India is a prominent player in this sector. In terms of fisheries, India is the third largest producer and fourth largest exporter. Also, the growth rates in the fishing sector are significant. For example, it is about 10% for prawns and about 8% for the fishing sector. Therefore, its contribution to GDP cannot be underestimated. Now, let's discuss the challenges that the fishing sector faces. One, there is the practice of overfishing or unsustainable levels of fishing. In the fishing sector, the fishing rate has to be less than the replenishment rate, the reproduction rate of the fish stocks. If we catch fishes at a higher rate than they are able to reproduce, it leads to the depleting of the fish stocks. When the larger fishes are unavailable, then we are forced to fish in the lower food chain, for example sardines, even squids, etc. Also, there are fishing subsidies which are provided, which leads to overfishing. FAO even notes, Food and Agriculture Organization even notes that compared to 4 decades ago, the unsustainable levels of fishing have increased. 4 decades ago, 10% of the fish stocks across the world were being fished at unsustainable levels. Now it has gone up to 34% approximately. There is another issue of bycatch. We use unsustainable fishing methods, for example, bottom trawlers. Now, using these bottom trawlers, everything which comes in the way is caught in the fishing nets. The unintended species also, for example, turtles are also caught in the fishing nets. Also, there is the problem of illegal fishing. When there is the lack of replenishment of the fishing stocks, then fishes are caught in the off season also, which is illegal. And it leads to lesser time being available for the replenishment of the fish stock. When we talk about the extension services available, then there is lacuna in the information support and credit which is available to the fishermen to ensure that fishing is done as per the quality standards. Also, the infrastructure, there are challenges in this sector, that is the availability of quality seed is not there. The availability of cold chain and the storage infrastructure to ensure, since the fishes are perishable in nature, there has to be availability of cold chains which is not there. And the post harvest losses increase because of the lack of the cold storage. The price discovery mechanisms are also not transparent, which leads to lesser remuneration to the fishermen. Now, what are the steps that the government has taken to improve the fishing sector? One, the government came up with the Blue Revolution 2.0. This is an umbrella scheme to promote the inland fisheries, aquaculture, mariculture, etc. in India, and the National Fisheries Development Board ensures the promotion of the inland as well as the marine fisheries in India. There is a scheme, Pradhan Mantri Matsya Sampada Yojana also. The goal of the scheme is to ensure that the production of fishes in India increases, to increase the exports of fishes, to increase the jobs in the fishing sector, for example in fish processing, ranching, etc., and to increase the incomes from the people involved in the fishing sector. It is to promote the inland fisheries as well as aquaculture and mariculture. The aquaculture infrastructure is also sought to be improved through this scheme, which includes the processing plants, ranching, fish seed production, etc. There is the National Genetic Improvement Facility for Shrimp Breeding. It is to reduce the dependency on a single species and also to promote the production and the indigenization of the shrimp species. The National Surveillance Program for the Aquatic Animal Diseases is to ensure that the aquatic animal diseases are detected and they are put under surveillance to ensure that there is a prevention of the spread of diseases. The Fisheries and Aquaculture Infrastructure Development Fund has been established with a corpus of 7.5 thousand crore rupees to ensure that there is sufficient infrastructure which is built in the processing sector especially. The Kisan Credit Card facility has been extended to the fisheries sector also. There are new areas where the fisheries are being promoted. For example, fishing can be done in saline and brackish waters. New reservoirs are being created, and in the floodplains also the fish breeding and fish production is promoted by the government. There is the eGopal app also. This is to ensure that the farmers, the fishermen are directly connected and there is the removal of middlemen, and the Sagar Pre-Karma app is also for the protection of fishermen. Now the next article is related to the financial stability report. The context behind it is that the RBI has released its biennial financial stability report. This is important in GS3 under the topic Indian economy and issues related to planning, mobilization of resources, growth, development and employment. Now, what is the financial stability report? The report is giving the details about the state of the financial stability in India, whereby there are contributions taken from all financial sector regulators. As a part of this financial stability report itself, the RBI also conducts a survey, the Systemic Risk Survey. In this survey, the experts and market participants are encouraged to participate to assess the 5 types of risks to the financial system in India, that is the global risk, financial risk, macroeconomic risk, institutional risk and the general risk to the economy. What is the significance of this financial stability report? It is telling us how robust or how vulnerable our financial system is, especially the banking sector, to the changes in the economy. And it is also to determine whether the banking system or the other lending institutions, for example, NBFCs, housing finance companies, etc., such lending institutions, how capable are they to support the future growth in India to ensure there is availability of enough credit as it is required for economic growth. For example, it determines the percentage of NPAs, the non-performing assets. If the non-performing assets as a percentage of the total assets of the bank are high in number, then it won't be able to lend as much, it will be under pressure. And if simultaneously there is a lot of fiscal deficit also from the side of the government, then the government shall also not be able to bail out the banks. It will lead to a further crisis. So such indicators are measured by the financial stability report and there are predictions done by it. When we look at the asset quality indicators, it has suggested that the macroeconomic conditions in the Indian economy have actually improved. The gross non-performing assets ratio as well as the net non-performing assets ratio for both the scheduled commercial banks have come down as compared to September 2022. Now, what are the key takeaways from this report? One, it has observed that the global economy remains resilient and stable, although there are heightened risks due to various factors. For example, there are prolonged geopolitical tensions, as is observed in the case of West Asia, Israel, Palestine issue, in the case of Ukraine war, etc. There are elevated public debts across the world, especially in the advanced countries, the Western countries. And there is a slow progress in the last mile of disinflation, but still the global economy remains resilient as of now. In the context of Indian economy also, the outlook remains positive. The report says that Indian financial system remains robust and resilient, as is observed in the form of improved balance sheets, as the NPA ratios have come down, although partly it is because of the writing off of the bad loans. But there are strong capital buffers which will further contribute to better lending position for the banks, the scheduled commercial banks, and they will be able to fund the infrastructure and provide for long-term loans. It will improve the asset quality and there is already adequate provisioning and robust earnings. Hence, it categorizes the Indian financial system as robust, and it also supports the economic activity through sustained credit expansion as is observed in various sectors, apart from the sectors from the priority sector lending as well. When we look at the capital to risk weighted assets ratio, this is the ratio between the capital and the risk weighted assets of a bank or a lending institution. The higher this ratio, better off the position of the bank is, as it will be having more capital. This is 16.8%, which is good, and the common equity tier 1 ratio of the scheduled commercial banks is 13.9%. When we look at the gross NPA ratio for the scheduled commercial banks, it has come down to 2.8%, which is a good number, and the net NPA ratio has come down to just 0.6%. When the macro stress tests were conducted for the credit risk, it was observed that the scheduled commercial banks, they will be able to comply with the minimum capital requirements even if the economy is stressed in the future. The NBFCs, the non-banking financial companies, they are also healthy, as the capital to risk weighted assets ratio is at 26.6%, which is even higher than the ratio for the scheduled commercial banks, and the gross NPA ratio is at 4%, which is also good, and the return on assets is at 3.3%. Overall, the report points to the positive data for the Indian economy going forward. Now, the next article is related to the SAARC currency swap. The context behind it is that the RBI will put in place a revised framework for the currency swap arrangement for SAARC for 2024 to 2027. This is important in GS2 under the topics bilateral, regional and global groupings and agreements involving India and affecting India's interests. What is a currency swap? Essentially, in a currency swap, a company should be having a comparative advantage if it borrows locally. Therefore, the central banks, they swap their currencies among themselves rather than trading in the hard currencies like US dollar or euro, etc. They can just swap their own currencies. For example, if company A needs funds in the local currency, then it can directly borrow from the bank, and the bank can directly swap funds from the central bank of another country, and it leads to easier settlements. So a currency swap is actually an agreement or a contract to exchange currencies. This is done at predetermined terms and conditions, predetermined rates. So it can be termed as an alternative source of funding. An alternative source of funding for short-term foreign exchange liquidity requirements. It can be met easily through the currency swap. Adequate foreign currency will be available in this way to avoid balance of payments crisis. This leads to no exchange rate risk or other market risks as the transaction terms are set in advance. Usually there is an exchange rate risk because of the fluctuations in the prices of the base currency as compared to the foreign currency. This exchange rate risk is eliminated if there is a swap agreement whereby the terms and conditions, the rates, etc., they are decided in advance. Now, what is the new framework that RBI is going to put in place for SAARC? Earlier, the SAARC currency swap framework came into operation first in 2012 in November. Then bilateral swap agreements are put in place with the SAARC central banks. Now the RBI is going to propose a new Indian rupee swap window. Under the new framework for the currency swap with SAARC countries, will be having an Indian rupee swap window whereby concessions will be given for swap support in the Indian rupees. The corpus of the rupee support for this mechanism will be 250 billion rupees. Simultaneously, will also continue to exchange the other currencies also. The swap arrangements in US dollar and euro, the hard currencies, they will remain under the overall existing corpus itself of the US $2 billion. This facility shall be available to all SAARC member countries subject to their signing the bilateral swap agreements. Now, the next article is related to the food buffer policy. The context behind it is that the open market sale of wheat and chana have helped in controlling the cereal and pulses inflation. So now there is an argument to extend the buffer stocks for the other staples as well to ensure their availability in times of emergency and to control their prices as well. This is important in GS3 under the topic issues of buffer stocks and food security. So the buffer stocks are maintained by the government for usually the food crops to ensure their availability when there is less production, less supply. Now, why buffer stocks are maintained? What are the objectives? One, it is to ensure food security. The agriculture production in India does not remain constant. There are years when the monsoon remains deficient. there are years of drought, flood, etc., which leads to decline in agriculture production also, and there can be situations where the demand is more than the supply. In such cases, the government releases the commodity, the food from the buffer stocks. Then it is useful for the implementation of the welfare schemes. For example, the food grains which are distributed through schemes like targeted public distribution system, they are released from the buffer stocks. It is important to ensure that there is stock for emergency. For example, when there is natural calamity, when there is a natural disaster, then we need to have some buffer stocks. It is also important in ensuring price stability. When the supply of any food crop, any item is less and the demand is high, then the price naturally increases. In such cases, the government undertakes open market operations, the market interventions, etc., whereby the government starts selling the food crop from the buffer stocks to ensure that there is enough availability in the open market and the price is eventually stabilized. Also, it is important for ensuring better returns, better remuneration for the farmers. In cases where the supply is far exceeding the demand, then the prices start coming down. In such cases, the government starts buying from the farmers and it starts filling the buffer stocks, which are again liquidated in times when the demand is higher than the supply. But there are certain issues in the buffer stock policy in India. One issue is the high procurement cost. For example, the storage cost, the warehousing cost, and there can even be diversion of the food grains, etc., from the warehouses, pilferage, leakages, damage, etc. Then there is environmental cost, because the government usually announces minimum support price for cereals. It leads to a skewed cropping pattern. The skewed cropping pattern in favor of the cereals leads to overusage of groundwater, because the cereals like rice, wheat, they require more water. It also leads to trade distortion, as there are allegations of distortion of trade against India at the WTO also. And then there is the open-ended procurement. Because of the open-ended procurement, it leads to a glut in supply and it leads to overflowing FCI godowns and the warehouses of the government. For this, the Shantakumar committee had recommended that we should have a transparent liquidation policy to ensure that the buffer stocks are liquidated as and when required. Now we'll be discussing 4 prelim snippets as well, related to Bolivia, Sengol, National Human Rights Commission and the SEBI norms on financial influencers. Now regarding Bolivia, Bolivia is a landlocked country located in South America. It shares its borders with Brazil, Peru, Chile, Argentina and Paraguay. It is named after the independence fighter Simon Bolivar. About 1/3 of the country is located in the Andes Mountains and the remaining in the Amazon basin. The constitutional capital of Bolivia is Sucre and the seat of government and executive capital is located at La Paz. The country also has the lake Titicaca. This lake is the highest lake in the world, which is also navigable to large vessels. The lake is located at 12,500 feet above the sea level. Let's look at the brief history of Bolivia also. In the 15th and 16th centuries, the ancient civilization of Inca reigned over Bolivia. From 1538 to 1825, the Spanish ruled over the country. There were a subsequent series of coups and counter-coups in Bolivia, and in 1982 finally a democratic civilian rule was established. Now recently there was again a coup attempt in Bolivia. The currency of Bolivia is Bolivian Boliviano and it has 37 official languages including Spanish. It has a mixed economic system as well. Now the next article is related to Sengol. Sengol is a scepter which signifies the transfer of power. The transfer of power to the first Prime Minister of India, Jawaharlal Nehru, from the British. There was a question over the nature of ceremony which should be conducted for signifying the transfer of power. For this, Viceroy Lord Mountbatten asked the Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru. Nehru consulted in turn to C. Rajagopalachari. C. Rajagopalachari suggested the Chola model. What happened during the times of Cholas was the transfer of power was done from one king to another. It was sanctified and blessed by a high ruler, and there was a handover of a Sengol from the king to the successor. So this model was adopted, and the Sengol was made by two persons, Wumidu Ithirazulu and Wumidu Sudhakar, and it was made 5 feet in length. It has a Nandi bull on top, which symbolizes justice. This handing over ceremony was conducted on the Independence Day eve as per the Tamil traditions, and a song was also played. The song was composed by the 7th century Tamil saint Tirunguna Sambandar. Now the next article is related to National Human Rights Commission. NHRC protects and promotes human rights. It is an independent statutory body which was established under the Protection of Human Rights Act 1993. It was established in consonance with the Paris Principles 1991. It composes of one chairperson and 5 members. The chairperson of NHRC is to be an ex-Chief Justice of India or a Supreme Court judge, and the 5 members shall comprise of one Supreme Court judge, one Chief Justice of High Court, and 3 people having knowledge of or practical experience in matters relating to human rights. Among these 3 experts in human rights, at least one has to be a woman. The members are appointed through an appointment committee. The appointment committee comprises of the Prime Minister, the Speaker of Lok Sabha, the Union Minister of Home Affairs, the Leader of Opposition of Lok Sabha, the Leader of Opposition in Rajya Sabha, and the Deputy Chairman in Rajya Sabha. The term of the members can be a maximum of 3 years, or the maximum age can be of 70 years, before which they are retired. The removal procedure of NHRC is that they can be removed by the President after an inquiry by the Supreme Court in case it is on the basis of proved misbehavior or incapacity. They can also be removed on other grounds, including if the NHRC member is adjudged and insolvent, or he engages in paid employment outside the duties of his office, or he is treated to be infirm of mind or body, or he is declared of unsound mind and so declared by a competent court, or if he is convicted and sentenced for an offence which in the opinion of the President amounts to moral turpitude. Now the next article is related to SEBI norms on financial influencers. Financial influencers are those people who influence us for taking financial decisions, just like influencers on social media, for example Instagram. So why do they do this? They get incentives. They get referral fees from the people whom they are promoting or advertising. They get commissions from them, or maybe non-cash benefits like free usage of their products or services, or profit sharing even. Or they can be directly compensated by the social media platform itself. Now SEBI has moved to restrict the role of the financial influencers. It says that regarding the SEBI registered entities, no registered entity shall engage in a monetary or non-monetary association for the promotion or advertisement of their products by the unregistered entities. They cannot pay any commission or referral fees. They also must not share any confidential information of their clients with unregistered entities. Although limited referrals are allowed from the retail clients, for example stock exchanges, etc., the financial influencers now have to be registered with the regulator or the stock exchanges or the Association of Mutual Funds of India, etc. The financial influencers also have to display their registration number, contact details, and also an investor grievance redressal helpline as well. They have to show appropriate disclosures and disclaimers on any posts also. For example, if they are getting any commission, any referral fees, etc., they have to disclose that. And the Advertising Standards Council of India also has a similar regulation. That is, disclosure label has to be there to identify a post as an advertisement if it is an advertisement.
Also, there can't be any ad which is giving any promise or guarantee of assured or risk-free return. It also prohibits the usage of terms like we are the best, we are number one, we are leading, we are top advertiser or research analyst, and one of the best among market leaders. Only the factual details about any awards, if received by the entity, can be shared as part of promotion advertisement. Thank you.